What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Unknown Destination, the podcast about anything and everything travel. I am Justin. That is your other host, Andrew. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I am so sleepy. Michigan winter is truly upon us. We finally have some snow sticking on the ground. So, just trying to get it going today.
Oh man, yeah, we haven't had anything stick here, but it was snowing in the morning yesterday, and today I was taking the kid to the bus stop, and it was 19 degrees. So it's definitely that time of year, and I'm actually even at 19 degrees, I'm glad I'm here and not there because I assume there it was probably close to single digits.
Yeah, I wouldn't know because I don't go outside when it's this cold.
I don't blame you.
I don't want to be here anymore.
Did you want to be there in the first place?
Yeah, jury's still out on that one.
Yeah. All right. So it's been a couple weeks. Again, I apologize for that. It was because I had started a new job. However, some things have changed, so I think we may be able to get back to a kind of normal schedule. But you never know. Honestly, we don't really have a set schedule. We just do when we can and upload when we can. Obviously, today you guys are kind of noticing the new format. I assume it looks a little bit different once I upload it. I think there's going to be a little bit of, you know, black lines on top and bottom of the screen and things like that. But using new software, going to try to act like the kids and use Zoom. Uh, Luckily, I've used it for jobs before, so it works fine, and it's allowing me to be able to use music and stuff like that and sound effects. So hopefully that upgrades the show a little bit.
Yeah, we've been kind of messing around with a bunch of different softwares. If anybody has noticed it, you probably wouldn't notice it so much if you're listening on Spotify or just as a traditional podcast, but probably in the YouTube video side of it, you might notice just couple different nuances. But this one probably is going to be what we're sticking with.
Yeah, especially considering the cost of it is $0.00. I think it's definitely going to be what we stick with from here on out.
You can't beat free.
That is true. Unless somebody wants to sponsor us, in which case you can pay us and we'll gladly advertise your software. Email is in the description.
Oh boy, it's gonna be one of those kind of casts today. I can feel it.
All right. Well, I guess I'll get us started. And we normally start with air travel, so I kind of want to change that up a little bit this week and start with hotels.
Okay.
Uh, as far as direct information about hotel chains or something specific, that's not so much what I have, but I do have the changes compared to last year for the previous week in hotel occupancy.
Okay.
Uh, so this would be for the week of November 15th to 21st. So keep in mind, this is the week before Thanksgiving. Obviously, you expect to see those numbers go up a little bit during holiday travel. But this was actually the lowest point in hotel occupancy since all the way back on March 11th. So there's definitely a downtrend that's starting to occur. Occupancy was at 41.2% for hotels. So below 50% for the first time actually since it started November 7th. They dropped below 50%. But other than that, it hadn't been below 50% since April. So a big deal right there. That is 32.6% less occupancy than the same week last year.
Wow.
Yeah. The average daily rate for hotel rooms, $88.54. For those of you that stay in hotels in the States, you know that that's a very low number. That's 29% lower than the same time last year. And the revenue that the hotel is actually making per booked room, only $36.45, which is actually less than half. Last year, it was 52.2% higher. So definitely seeing a downtrend in hotel occupancy because of COVID spiking in different areas of the country. And unfortunately, I think you will see that boost during the weeks of Thanksgiving and Christmas from people who are traveling despite restrictions and things like that. But after that, I think you're about to see the hotel industry start to be getting hit even harder and really being more in line with the airline industry.
Yeah. On that same note, I think um, probably going into 2021 after, like you were saying, after the holidays are done, I don't foresee this going in an upward trend, unfortunately. I know that were pretty optimistic the past couple episodes here, but with COVID, like you said, just spiking again at pretty much everywhere, including Europe, which is between the States and Europe. That's a lot of the tourism industry worldwide. So I don't know. I don't There were a lot of hotels that were planning on reopening in 2021 early. I don't necessarily foresee that happening. I'm still optimistic about the corporate traveler just because Asia is doing okay at the moment. So if they can kind of lock down some of those things that we talked about last week, where you aren't going to need to quarantine for 2 weeks as long as you can get that COVID test before your flight, I think that may bring some of that business travel back to China, Japan, even Australia. So hopefully that is still on the up and up. But yeah, for the pleasure traveler, I think you're going to be stuck for a while, either road tripping by yourself or with your family, as opposed to international travel.
Yeah. A lot more to come in this episode about those restrictions actually and places that you can travel and can't. Lots of changes have happened in the past week. Unfortunately, this virus is spiking everywhere, and because of people traveling for the holiday, it's expected to spike even more here. Unfortunately, it's just not something that's currently contained. Obviously, we have some good news coming out about vaccines and stuff like that, but that's not going to make a difference right now. Uh, as far as a little more information on those travel trends, there was one top 25 market that was able to surpass 50% occupancy, and that is the Tampa St. Petersburg area in Florida at a whopping 50.4% occupancy.
Oh, that was lackluster. I was excited for a second.
However, two cities that are actually pretty big tourist destinations had the lowest occupancy levels, and that was Oahu and Hawaii at only 22.9%, and Chicago, Illinois at only 26.6%. Illinois actually has some of the strongest restrictions, especially in the city of Chicago. There's actually additional restrictions, so not a huge surprise there. But unfortunately, I think it's something that we're going to keep, just seeing from here on out, especially because, again, I hate to keep bringing politics into this, but without any fiscal stimulus coming most likely the rest of the year, a lot of these hotels are going to have to start laying off employees and things like that again, too.
Yeah, I was just because it definitely makes sense why Hawaii would be up there. I thought I had heard like whispers of them having kind of like a Japan style quarantine where they weren't really letting people like in or out just to keep their numbers low. So I was just kind of looking at that, and it looks like they don't have their resort bubbles in place yet. And that was a huge reason as to I'm assuming that's a huge reason as to why their travel numbers were so low at the beginning of this holiday. Um, I'm just trying to see if there is. So it looks like starting tomorrow um, is their pre-travel testing program. So they're like we were talking about on the last episode, where they had some of the airlines were working with countries to try to do those pre-test flights to make sure everybody was safe before traveling. Hawaii is doing that. There are some places in Hawaii that are opting out of this program as well. So I'm thinking we'll probably know more about this next week. But my guess is they're trying to get these travel bubbles. They're calling them resort bubbles. They're probably trying to get them in place before the Christmas season, that holiday
Yes.
break.
So I love when you bring something up that transitions right into something that I have. And we don't actually have to wait till next week because I have a little bit more information on that right now.
Oh, okay.
Uh, Almost everywhere in Hawaii has opted into these resort bubbles, and I actually have some additional information about Hawaiian Airlines and their testing. But let's go ahead and start with where is opting out of that program, and that is the island of Kauai. They
Mm-hmm.
have opted out of that altogether, which means they will keep the 14-day quarantine regardless of COVID-19 test results. it is expected that they may even add restrictions to where they do not allow any type of non-essential travel into the island. So that's definitely something that's a big deal for them. The governor made the request because there were so many COVID-19 infections and travel related cases on the island of Kauai that he just didn't feel comfortable with people coming onto the island. So definitely a big deal. It's recommended that anybody traveling to Kauai actually reaches out to airlines and hotels and cancels or rearranges their travel plans now.
Yeah, that's I was kind of wondering just with those numbers being so low as to what that was, and yeah, they have quite a bit of information on that. I'm glad you had some more to kind of reinforce that, since I did see that the Kauai was the one that had opted out. Now, I'm not an expert on Hawaii or Hawaiian resort travel, but I would assume that if one of your basically if one of your islands is uh opting out of this, that's probably going to put that damper on your total tourism income for the state.
Yeah. So it's definitely going to affect all of the islands. Kauai is obviously going to be the most affected. However, there's a little bit more information for anybody flying to Hawaii from the Bay Area. Bay Area airports up to this point have been offering testing at San Francisco and at Oakland International. And those COVID testing facilities have actually been booking up really fast to the point where there's almost no appointments available. So if you're somebody that wants to travel to Hawaii, you do need to get those reservations in now. And this one's very important. So Oakland, at first at the airport, that COVID testing was free. That is no longer the case. Uh, for expedited results within 24 hours, if you need that right away, it is $120. And if you just need regular results for 48 to 72 hours, it's only $20. So their two testing sites actually require a reservation to be made within 3 days of travel, and they don't recommend relying on the same day tests. But they're doing the best they can with that online reservation system. So that's what's going on at those two airports. But Hawaiian Airlines actually takes it a bit further. They've actually opened testing locations within 10 minutes of airports. So these are independent testing stations that Hawaiian Airlines is operating. It looks like right now for San Francisco passengers, there's one on Loomis Street. And then they're actually adding new locations in LA, Las Vegas, Portland, and Seattle, and just opened a second LA location in Culver City. In Las Vegas, they're working with UMC of Southern Nevada to provide testing at the Las Vegas Convention Center and 9 other quick care locations. And then in Portland, they're working with another company. It looks like it's called Biotech to provide testing there. So Hawaiian Airlines doing everything they can to get you down there for your December Hawaiian vacation. But just keep in mind that these sites are booking up fast. So if you are traveling in December, you need to make sure to get that reservation made ahead of time.
Yeah, that's a good thing to bring up because a lot of people, when this was kind of first starting the testing at the airports, they weren't. It was kind of just like walk in only. They didn't really have appointments necessarily until they had a system in place. And now that that's in place, just keep that in mind, like Justin's saying here, because you don't want to get there and have them say, well, when's your appointment, and all of a sudden you can't even go
Right.
because on your most likely very expensive Hawaiian trip.
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news is that a lot of airlines are less restrictive now about changing your tickets and things like that because of COVID. However, if you're changing that ticket same day, they may be waiving the change fee, but you're still paying a crazy fare difference.
Yeah,
Uh,
for doing a day of.
yeah, so definitely something to keep in mind. Something kind of related, but not completely, is another thing that the CDC has actually said recently. As of before, they were saying that when you get back from traveling in the US, you should quarantine for 14 days. Those guidelines have actually been updated where if you get a test and the test is negative, you only need to quarantine for 7 days. But if you don't get the test, obviously it would still be the full 14. So if you get back and you need to go to work or do something like that, and you have the ability to go get a COVID test, do that because that cuts your quarantine time in half.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, this is not us promoting to be
No.
traveling during now, or spending all that money to go on a very expensive trip. just because of how uncertain everything is. It's a very risky time health wise to travel as well as financially, because we saw it earlier, probably in March, when kind of everything went to hell in a handbasket. That's a lot of people are out of quite a bit of money just because of the the pain that it is to try to get your money back from a company after you've already given it to them. And I think everybody's probably experienced that in some point in their life, but this is no exception, especially with a lot of airlines and companies not really having anything in place. If something does happen on more of a global shutdown scale as opposed to U.S. restrictions, I would definitely be wary of that at the just traveling in general at the moment.
Yeah, that's definitely good advice. I would say, as travel professionals, I don't think either one of us would feel comfortable recommending anybody travels right now. So, something to keep in mind, don't do it unless you absolutely need to. If you're going to, try to be safe, but it's not something that we recommend. On that note, I think we need to take a quick break here for a minute. We will be back in just a moment.
I think.
Okay, we are back. Sorry about that, everybody. A little bit of technical difficulties. Just wanted to be sure everything was recording properly. It was. We are good to go. So let's continue on from there. Basically, last we left off here, that was a very delayed airplane. What?
Where's the plane coming from?
Where are they? Uh-oh.
I think it dropped something.
That didn't sound good. Anyway,
It's still going.
dear Lord. What?
We're under fire.
I refuse to edit this out because this has become hilarious.
If anybody can't tell, we are playing around with some new toys during this cast. So thanks for bearing with us. This is trying to make it a little bit more fun for everybody.
And it's fun for us when we don't know what's going to work and how quickly it's going to work. Delayed sound effects are quite fun because they just pop up out of nowhere.
So I think we pretty much had nailed everything that we had for the hotel world. Like we said, not too much going on there. Same pretty much for flights. But we can kind of go into any news that we have here for the world of the air in the past couple weeks.
Yeah. So do you have anything to start with, or?
Yeah, just about the holiday travel. Just because I know that the CDC only gave about a week for people saying to not travel, which obviously is not very much time for when you've already got your plans booked out. So yeah, honestly, you can't really blame people for traveling when they've already had everything squared away for a while, and then they get that kind of bombshell dropped on them. We do have numbers here that for the first time since March, there were over 1 million travelers checked at TSA checkpoints across the country. So it's a lot of people traveling for the holiday, especially during the in the midst of COVID. So that was a lot of people were pretty upset that there were so many travelers. But when you're only given a week, you can only change so many plans. I guess that's kind of where I'm starting off here. Is just the number of cases have been skyrocketing, and then this is not going to be doing it any favors.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I definitely kind of want to touch on that too, because there's been a lot of sensationalized headlines from mainstream media about record-setting travel during this past week, and I want to make some clarifications on that as a travel professional as to what actual records are set and things like that. Um, More people did not travel this year than ever before. The record that you are seeing is this was the most amount of travelers that have happened since the beginning of the pandemic in March. It is still 50% less travelers than this time last year. So I think it's very important to make it clear that the majority of people are still doing what they can to, lower the spread and
Hmm.
not traveling. And I just want to make that clear because I feel like there's so many sensationalized headlines with these new record amount of travelers, and that's just not
Yeah,
accurate.
yeah, I would say that in any mainstream media, if you see record number of travelers, you can probably safely assume that they mean since the pandemic started. At least when it comes to the travel world, because we're not, any, realistically speaking, we're not going to be hitting any real record breaking numbers for a very long time. On Justin's point, we had 6.8 million travelers in the week leading up to Thanksgiving last year. So we're at 1.25 million. So we are
Yeah.
5 million passengers less than last year. So
Yeah.
just to keep in mind.
So to touch on that a little bit more directly, there was a CNN headline that said Sunday was the busiest day for U.S. air travel since the pandemic began, which is true, but they did actually go on to specify a little more on numbers. TSA this past Sunday screened 1.17 million people heading home from Thanksgiving travels. That's 41% of the 2.9 million people screened by TSA that same day in 2019. 2019 did set a TSA record. So last year was the most travelers. This year we're at less than half that. So just a little bit of clarification on that.
That's
No,
kind of
there's
ironic.
yeah, you're right. I'm glad people got it out before they knew they'd be stuck inside.
Yeah, that's and on that point too, kind of switching gears a little bit, but just from working all of 2019 in the corporate travel world, um, I can say that business was definitely higher than it was before I was working at a different agency in 2016, 2017. I was noticing that they were traveling more than ever, and it's kind of interesting to see that because I had never looked up stats necessarily before on it, but just knowing the November numbers compared to last year, it definitely makes sense. And I think I'm might be kind of curious as to like maybe a 10-year span of travel, just leading up to that. It's always it was almost like a breaking point of the virus. The virus kind of collapsed the growth.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'd be interested into, especially because for those of you that are not familiar with corporate travel, those of us who work in the travel industry on the corporate side are very used to not having work or having a lot of our vacation time available at the end of the year. November and December tend to be months where we're not doing anything, to be 100% honest. Lots of travel agencies will offer you options where you can take some of your vacation and then take the rest of the month off voluntarily unpaid for free and things like that. So uh
Yeah, yeah,
interesting that you saw that trend.
yeah. Just to touch on that too, I want to kind of explain a little bit to people who aren't necessarily familiar with the corporate travel world, or I guess the finance portion of that. The reason why Justin's saying that we don't really do very much in November, December, a lot of these companies will end their fiscal year October. So you're looking at the weeks leading up to that. So the September is normally the busiest time if you're trying to book through a corporate travel agent. For leisure, you're probably not going to be able to get them just because the demand is so heavy. Everybody is trying to uh, use up their fiscal year money before the next one so they can keep their budget. That's kind of how, if you're not familiar with like the larger companies and budgets and how that kind of thing works, a lot of places, if they don't use their full travel budget, they will lower their travel budget for the next year,
Yeah.
which the people that are traveling heavily for these companies obviously don't want, because they don't want to have to be taking the cheapest flights or not flying business class somewhere, or staying in maybe not the nicest hotel. So you really see a lot of people booking for the following year in September, so that way they can kind of get their trips lined up while they still have that budget available.
Yeah, and to add a little bit more to that, a lot of times, so their budget will end at the end of October, and they may not have their new budget approved for the future year until January, because a lot of those departments honestly just have a lot of time off during the holidays. The week of Thanksgiving, the week of Christmas, the week of New Year's. There's just nobody in the office, so nothing happens.
Yeah, they pretty much have to wait for those numbers to come through, their final numbers on how much they spent in travel on that year, because they still have trips going on. It's usually just few and far between. In November, December, there aren't normally too many big business meetings in those last 2 months because of that reason. These companies that are doing business with other companies, they all know how their system works, so they're not going to be traveling too much in those last 2 months, so they can get their finances squared away for the next year.
Yeah, and we're about to jump into airlines, I think, but since we're touching on this, I kind of want to talk about how that's going to affect travel agencies going into the future, especially
Okay.
the corporate travel management companies. A lot of you may think, oh, well, the vaccine's going to pass, and then these companies are going to be able to come back, recover. They're going to be able to employ all these travel agents again. And here's the reality: almost all of those major companies that had travel plans this year now have vouchers sitting with these airlines that they can use for travel, which is a great thing because, yes, they need a travel agent to come in and help them redeem those vouchers. The problem is the travel agencies aren't making any money off of doing those vouchers because they already made the money on the original booking. So because of that, I think you're going to see the recovery of corporate travel management companies take a little bit longer than you're going to see the rest of the industry take, because really they're not making money until there's new reservations being made.
Yeah, and I actually do have a little bit more insight on that as well. I had
Awesome.
a pretty large meeting with my own company, and um, a lot of these travel management companies don't exist anymore.
Sure.
Spoiler alert: COVID destroyed probably, if I had to guess, probably 80 to 90% of travel management companies. Like, if you were not one of the big five or so, you probably are really struggling slash don't exist. So there's going to be a lot of hiring, I think, for those larger travel management companies in the next year, because of what Justin said, where these companies were probably released their vouchers from, if they were going through a smaller company that went under, and so now they're going to be expected to book it themselves, or they're going to sign a contract with a new company, and it's going to be an absolute nightmare for myself. But I am very thankful to still have my job to go back to. And I personally am one of those people who loves a challenge. So I am excited to deal with a lot of very angry people calling me and having them read out a 47-digit code for their voucher. Um, just because that's it. These people are so stressed out that if we can make their day a little bit better, I think that's kind of the point of being a corporate travel consultant. Is they're already having to travel for work. If we can make that a little bit easier and take a little bit off their plate, I feel like they can be some of the most grateful travelers you ever deal with in the industry.
I would agree with that. I will say working in corporate travel has allowed me to build some great relationships with the travel arrangers that I work with, to the point where a lot of times we're working with the same people over and over, especially if it's one specific contact for like a company that you're booking group travel for or something like that. I know Andrew worked on a few projects with me where I was working with this travel arranger basically every day for 3 months, just helping them book their reservations. And I know he helped on a couple of those projects. And those are the kind of projects I love because you really get to know these people. And that's a lot different than a leisure traveler who doesn't really know where they want to go. And I want to say, obviously, no offense to those of you that are traveling leisure, but when it comes to working in the travel industry, it's just easier to work for corporate travelers because they kind of know what they need and what they want when they want it, and they know you. So, yeah, there's a difference there for sure.
Yeah, and that was honestly one of the hardest things about leaving the previous travel agency that Justin and I both worked at. I absolutely loved the travel arrangers. I love my clients. There were a few that were pretty sad to see me go.
Yeah,
Honestly, there aren't too many male travel consultants
true.
in these large corporate travel agencies. So you really get to honestly, they know who they're talking to a lot of the time because there just aren't many of us. So they're oh Andrew, oh how's it? How's your day? How's your daughter? It would actually get to that point where I've never met these people in my life, but I talk to them every single day. So it's almost like having a pen pal in a weird way.
Yeah.
Just minus the male because it's like those people you never see or meet, but you know so much about their life as you're going through. It's one of the reasons why I keep coming back to travel. I may take a break here or there for uh, other opportunities, but I think in the long haul, this is where the heart lies.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. It's actually kind of funny. Andrew and I were definitely on the minority of people in the office in the sense of that we were both men working in travel, and we were both on teams where I believe on my team there was only one other guy working, and on your team I'm not
Yeah,
sure
on
there were
mine,
any.
yeah, there was one other gentleman, George. If you somehow hear this, I miss you. He worked out of his home, but he was, I believe, I can't remember. He worked somewhere very tropical because he would always send us pictures about how great everything was. And he was our bilinguist on the team. So the account that we worked on did a lot of South American travel. And he was loved by many arrangers. Like most men that work there, honestly, it was people would ask for us all the time. But yeah, so two, that's three. So you think between we handled probably 2 to 3 thousand individual clients that like three men. And there was probably
Yeah.
40 women. So they really knew who we were. And if we screwed up, they would say we talked to a man, and we're like, oh no, that's us. That's not me.
True. And it was actually kind of funny. Andrew and I technically worked on different teams, but sometimes we would take the overflow from each other's teams. And, you answer the phone with your name, but sometimes people aren't listening right away. I think I was actually mistaken for Andrew a couple of times, and I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happened to him. So,
Oh yeah. That's the thing too is they a lot of times they wouldn't really be paying attention to your name or your voice at the beginning. And I did have one arranger who it was the one of the larger projects that Justin was working on for booking a whole lot of people, and she thought that I was Justin just because she heard a man's tone, and
yeah.
I will be whoever you want as long as you're nice to me. That's
And I think your point of like I know exactly who you're talking about right at the top of my head. So it definitely speaks to the relationships that you build. Obviously this isn't the content that you normally come for, but I think it's important for people to kind of have a glimpse into why we love working in travel and things like that. Obviously, I've chosen to leave a couple different agencies for a couple different reasons, and a big part of that is that travel as a corporate travel management company, those companies haven't been stable honestly in years. A big reason that I left the job that me and Andrew were both at was because we were seeing a lot of people getting laid off around us, and I didn't like not having the comfort of having a paycheck as I sit here now without having a paycheck. um but I had actually started with a new travel management company, and I was only there for 3 days before they canceled the training class. But I had already gotten to know the people that worked there and felt really comfortable. And I hope one day to go back to that agency. I know Andrew's found kind of the home that he's finally in with the company that he's with, and honestly, he's incredibly lucky to still be there because most of the companies, including his, have laid off honest thousands of people. So anybody in the industry that has that job right now is incredibly grateful that it still exists. And there's a lot of us that truly do miss it. And hopefully that comes back soon. But I think the reason that I kind of wanted to touch on that is because, like we said earlier, we don't recommend traveling right now. Yes, that does hurt us on a personal level in the sense of
Spiritual, emotional, all the above.
spiritual, emotional, financial. Because if you guys aren't traveling, especially if you're a corporate traveler, it hurts us in the sense of there's layoffs and things like that happening and furloughs and all this money is running out. But we don't recommend it now because we want to have our jobs in the future, and you're prolonging that if you're traveling irresponsibly right now.
Yeah, that's the big thing is I feel like we as a nation, a people, the human race, kind of take things for granted in the long run. We look very much at the short term, the slash what have you done for me lately, and don't necessarily look at the big picture sometimes. And I think us in the travel industry saw very early on that if we didn't A, develop a vaccine quickly, B, shut down the country, C, do these things that the other countries around the world were doing, that there was a good chance that our jobs were going to be lost.
Yeah.
And that may be selfish thinking from a travel professional. I know a lot of people out there are struggling, but I also know that we had some help in the beginning when we could have kind of taken care of things in a more decisive manner, like places such as China, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, these places that really, really locked everything down. And to be honest, not to get too political, but I'm very more small government than I don't necessarily have a party alignment. But I do believe in less government handling than more. I think that's better for the people. And in this pandemic, I would have liked to see more involvement to give
Yeah.
people the peace of mind that it's okay to stay home. You don't need to worry about your bills. You don't need to worry about like where the next meal's coming from. Because a lot of people, I'm not saying that I was in that situation, but I know a lot of people were. I'm not one of those close my eyes, I'm fine, so that means the world's fine kind of people. I'm very active with community and seeing how everybody's doing. I know small businesses were just decimated during this. I think that's where we as a nation failed to step up to protect the little guys that needed help during this. And if we would have done that, maybe we would have seen maybe not the so selfish thinking that we have become so used to. Um, but hopefully we can get this kind of squared away. I know that the testing is really good now. With that being said, I had a whole spiel planned for an international destination that I was going to be promoting the absolute hell out of, and I can't in good faith do that now. I had a friend come and visit for the holidays. She just returned home and she tested positive for COVID.
Wow.
She is one of the safest travelers that you could be. She was teaching in China in March. Uh, she's lived in Wuhan for a while. Um, like this, she's a very, very safe, well-versed traveler. And she left a few days ago, got home, assuming that she contracted it on the way home, since she basically stayed with me for a week, as well as another mutual friend, and then her parents. And all of us have quarantined properly. So I will be getting tested as well, just to be on the safe side. Because I think that if there's any chance that you could have it, you should get tested. There are too many places around that offer it. To don't let it become a pride thing, or don't let it become something where you're trying to. Don't make excuses to not do it. It takes 10 minutes. Um, that I mean, I don't want to go to my parents who are both pushing 70 and be the reason why they're no longer here. Regardless of your beliefs on the stance, um, COVID is real, and you can absolutely get tested. And you know what? If you don't want to get tested, don't leave your house for 2 weeks. I don't care what you do.
Yeah.
Just do what you need to.
Yeah, it's interesting. This took a turn, and I don't think it's something either of us thought we were going to kind of harp on for the majority of a podcast, but it's important. And
And I
as
don't think it's necessarily negative either.
I don't either, and I think as travel professionals, whether I'm employed or not, we have a responsibility to tell people what we think is appropriate to do as far as travel. And right now, it's try not to. And if you're going to, at least go out and get tested. Obviously, this is a big deal for us too because we both have kids. We're both parents. That is funny that she just popped up right on cue as I said, we both have kids.
Yeah, she heard something going on and she had to come investigate.
But while Andrew deals with his daughter, it's just really important that you guys do what you can to make sure that you are protecting yourself, your family, and other human beings. It's not a political issue. This is an issue of having human decency and making sure other people are taken care of. As far as masks, wear a damn mask. I don't care who you are.
I don't care if it does a bit of good either. I don't care if it does jack diddly. Why not? That is my wholehearted belief. If you say you can't breathe in it, you're a psychopath, because they've proven time and time again with cancer patients, people that have breathing disorders, that your oxygen level is still 99.8% like correct while you're using any kind of mask.
And I have asthma, and I still wear a mask everywhere I go. And I'll admit, at first, it was something that was hard for me to get used to. And I will admit that back at the early points of this, I wasn't necessarily wearing a mask everywhere I went when it wasn't required. I do regret that now, but
I was, because I'm not a bad person, Justin.
You just don't go anywhere, so shut up.
Right, that's fair. Also a good point. Also very true.
No, but I wasn't going very many places either, but it was something that you definitely have to get used to. My parents are both visually impaired, and with my mom, it actually does make her dizzy because it can affect your peripheral vision, but she still wears a mask everywhere she goes. There may be a few medical exemptions that do actually make sense, where even that 0.2% might actually affect you. And for those people, I totally understand.
Sure.
But for everybody else, there's no other reason. Don't give people hell. Arguing over it just makes you look like an idiot.
Yeah, it makes you look like you're inconsiderate of others, honestly. If you're one of those few and far between cases that it is impairing you, obviously that this whole spiel is not directed towards you.
Right.
This is directed towards the people that think wearing a mask takes away your freedom. I don't know how that's a thing. Because people are fine wearing shirt and shoes into stores because that is a law. I don't know why a mask is as big of a deal as it is.
And here's the other thing. We want people to listen to this podcast. We're trying to grow this audience. But if you're one of those people that's not wearing a mask, my guess is you're not a very responsible person, and I don't want you traveling anyway. So I don't really care if you listen.
Right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Justin hit nail on the head there. We definitely want this to be more. We want the audience to grow here. We want people to be asking us questions, because that's the only way that this is going to be able to keep going. Is with you guys that are listening, taking time out of your day for your hour to listen to us ramble on about different travel around the world. We're definitely not by any means trying to make this a political or COVID. It gets talked about enough. The problem is that in the travel world, COVID's affecting everything. We're not really getting into specifics of it for main reasons, as to a lot of things about COVID are opinion based, and we don't want to kind of villainize beliefs on the issue. Now, if you think that wearing a mask is the worst thing in the world, you probably deserve to be a villain, villainized a little bit, just because of the ramifications of what if you are wrong. It's, if say you're right and masks don't help at all, great. But if you're wrong and they do help and you're not wearing them, then I mean, what do you gain from not wearing one is the biggest question. So
Yeah.
I think from there we can switch gears though, unless you had anything else there.
I can
I
transition us back in. I have something kind of related that'll bring us into air travel. So
oh okay, yeah, I had a I don't know if you want me to start. I've got airline share information.
before we get to that, let's just touch
Okay.
on this one last thing that is COVID-19 related directly. Actually, two things. So the first thing is just new CDC guidelines about U.S. Citizens traveling to Mexico. And basically, the recommendation is now don't do it. There's been major spikes in Mexico because people have been traveling to Mexico this entire time. And now the CDC is saying if you can avoid it, absolutely don't. Just to give you an idea, the week of November 23rd, travel was only down 12% from flights from the US to Mexico from last year. Obviously, everywhere else that we're talking about, we're talking 50%. So, not a lot of people have stopped going there. Because of that, they've seen an increase in cases. So, just don't do it. Um, that's all on that. And then this one, I'm a little conflicted about telling this story just because of the way that it's phrased, but I think I still need to, because
Tell it, and I'll contradict it.
okay, well, it's titled "How Can Americans Get Around Italy's Mandatory Quarantine?"
Oh,
And obviously,
yikes.
we don't promote getting around it, but let's give some clarification to that.
Spicy headline.
Right. Delta's actually starting a new program that's going to be in accordance with a decree that they're expecting from the government of Italy, where they're starting a COVID testing partnership with the Atlanta Hartfield Jackson Airport. So you'll be able to get COVID tested at the airport in Atlanta, and then that'll be 72 hours before departure. You'll have to do another rapid test at the Atlanta airport before boarding, another rapid test when you arrive in Rome, and then another rapid test on your way back home.
I'm okay with that.
So yeah, the title of the article is
It's
a little misleading.
it's a clickbaity headline because it's I actually hate how that's worded.
I do
That
too.
I don't. What source was that?
SF Gate.
I shame on you. That's
Yeah.
the worst. That's not even clickbait. That's just it. It's almost trying to get people who are like, screw you, I'm gonna travel anyway. It's trying to like target at those people for some reason when it could have just said you can still get to like a better headline that I just came up with in 0.2 seconds. You can still travel to Italy. Here's how.
Yeah,
Like it's still
that's a tough
clickbaity.
one.
It's just as clickbaity, but you're not trying to target a certain audience. Like it almost that headline makes me think they're trying to target like an angry audience. Like
Yeah,
you can sneak through this way, but it's not at all. You're still getting tested 4 times.
and right. And here's the thing: this article is actually where a lot of my information this week is coming from, because it's basically like a weekly roundup of things that they've addressed in the travel industry. But just that section, just poor journalism is the way to headline it, because it, it kind of relates to the whole fear mongering thing too, and it's just, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's unfortunately that makes our job hard because there really are only so many sources that you can trust nowadays to give you quality information in a timely manner. I would say too, just because how many stories fluff things. I mean, you could try to Google, airports that have rapid COVID testing, and you're having to scroll through 4 pages of written. That's not what the people want. The people want bullets. They want to know, I'm traveling to San Francisco. Do they have it? I'm
Right.
going from San Francisco to Alaska to Detroit. Am I going to be able to get tested in each of these airports? I don't know why journalism is how it is nowadays. It hasn't adapted with the times, that's for sure. Especially in today's modern tech world, you would really think that they would know their audience of I want it now and I want it quickly, which is like the opposite of a podcast. A podcast is normally put on as background noise / something that you can kind of half pay attention to and still get the gist of. When you're looking something up, you really want to know what you're doing right then. So journalism, I think, has changed, or it needs to change quite a bit to still be relevant.
I would agree. You know, I'm not one to be out here screaming fake news and things like that because I think that in itself can be damaging as well. Uh, but I will say there's a lot more independent sources now, especially with people like us making content on YouTube or podcasts. Obviously, we have to get our information from somewhere, but uh, you know, I do kind of want to shout somebody out when it comes to updates on COVID and updates, especially on stimulus packages. There's a YouTuber under the name Meet Kevin who does all of his research by actually reading government bills and things like that. And
Wow.
I think that's great. Now, first of all, that takes a ton of time, and the man uploads 2 to 5 videos a day, which is insane. I don't know how he has time, and he also made almost $1 million in 1 month by doing it. So props to him. But
Wow.
yeah, you know, it's important to know your sources and things like that. And unfortunately, headlines like that are just kind of damaging. And honestly, they're damaging to our industry.
Speaking of damaging to the industry, that actually will lead me into our airline shares in the stock market. They've been on the rise here probably the last couple weeks, um, pretty much since the beginning of the month. That mostly was due to the announce of a vaccine, the results of the vaccine trials, how everything is looking pretty optimistic. They dropped uh, in retrospect, just in the past week here, they've dropped roughly like 7% on average between all of the airlines, between American, Spirit, JetBlue. Um, and that's mostly because people are kind of freaking out. Investors are saying, you know, why is this happening? Yes, COVID numbers are still going up, but we've got this in the future. Um, they're basically saying that we jumped the gun on raising the stock price. So another reason why you don't panic slash make rash decisions when it comes to paying attention to the stock market. I think we've learned in the past 4 to 10 years or so that what one person says can drastically affect the stock market. And everybody's affected by that. That's the airlines that went that have had those big plummets have all came out with statements, just basically just reminding people that there is a vaccine in the works. And even JetBlue has said, "Listen, we told you guys that even if there is a vaccine, travel is not going to be what it was for at least another year and a half, 2 years. So we don't know why you put these valuations on us anyway." Which I think is the correct statement to make, to be honest, because if you think about it, they're not trying to push the blame, pass the buck in a way of, oh yeah, well we don't know why the shares are going down. They're saying we don't know why you brought them up in the first place. Um,
Yeah.
but they'd be just because of an announcement that a vaccine was going to be working. Um, we've talked about this, I believe, before, that even when we do have a vaccine, we're still going to be looking at similar, if not the exact same issues of travel is going to still be slow slash risky because of people like the anti-vaxxers, because of people that can't get vaccinated, people that don't want to travel because they still don't feel comfortable. There was a survey last week that I was reading that most people wouldn't be traveling for the next year anyway, even if there was a vaccine,
Yeah.
just because they wouldn't feel safe still. So we're going to be looking at probably like well into 2021 before things get truly back to normal. Of course, I'm supposed to be returning to work here in about a month or so. If that does happen, I can, of course, give more of an inside perspective of what I'm seeing. So I'm hoping that everything still goes through as planned. Um, with
But it's a
the
big
other,
if. That's
yeah,
that's where
and
we're at.
the good news is, well, for me, I don't know about everybody else, but the good news for me is that we had our biggest sales year ever.
Oh
Um,
wow.
which I kind of want to just bring that up because, like I said, if you're working for one of probably the top 5 management companies and you survived the pandemic, the companies that didn't survive are all looking for travel management companies
That's true.
because they don't have one. So that made it pretty easy, I think, for probably the salespeople to go in and get contracts set up. So yes, nobody's traveling right now, but as soon as they start traveling again, there's going to be a huge need for agents back into these larger companies just because of the contracts that were put in place this year. So that's kind of the glass half full approach of it is, yeah, industry has been crippled, but for in the future, it looks like at least I'll be set. So go Andrew. But in seriousness, that's it. It's very uplifting to see. I can't obviously say any of the accounts that we have acquired, but they are some of the largest in the world that are not going to be going anywhere. So as soon as they give the okay to travel again, we are going to be slammed, and I'm excited.
And you'll be able to be above water again. You get the pun.
Exactly. I get to, instead of having the snorkel, I'll just be head above water.
For those of you that are listening and that makes no sense, Andrew's got a fish life background going on our recording.
Oh no, I'm actually just underwater. I just this is all being recorded underwater in real time.
In that case, I'm impressed with your hair and voice.
Yeah, that's everybody says that. I'm a merman.
Oh Lord. Well, we're coming up on an hour recording already, so let's jump into this airline news as we both kind of ranted there for a while. Necessary rants though. But you mentioned JetBlue, which actually gives me a little bit of transition into this. JetBlue does plan to introduce new transatlantic service in the third quarter of 2021. It will be on their new Airbus A321LR aircraft, but it will not be flying into Heathrow. They will be going into Gatwick. The reason is they applied for 21 slot pairs, which is basically 3 flights a day to go into Heathrow, but Heathrow doesn't have the gates to be able to do that, so they denied their request. So because of that, they'll be going to Gatwick only for 1 daily round trip for their slots there. So that service is expected to start next year, one from JFK and then another one and it looks like one a day from Boston to Stansted, which is 42 miles northeast of London. So some new transatlantic flights coming next year. So that's positive news.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. Anytime that there's new routes open, it's always it's exciting to me, especially when they're pulled off quicker than normal. Which we talked on a previous episode about the versatility of the air travel industry. Just how quickly they're able to turn these new routes around that used to take 6 months to a year to possibly multiple years to get these routes set up, and they're able to do it in less than a month, less than 3 months. Just to get everything, because they don't know how long the routes will be viable for in the current state of the world, and they want to take advantage of the demand that's there. So very, very cool to see.
Yeah. A little bit more airline news into that. But actually kind of unrelated. This week, American Express reopened its Centurion Lounge at the Phoenix airport. That means that now 10 of its 13 locations are back in business after closing down in March. So for those of you who are business or first class travelers or have an American Express card and have access to the lounges, that's good news. A lot of them are available again. Unfortunately, Denver and Heathrow, they were building new lounges. Those are going to be delayed until sometime into 2021, and the lounges in Vegas and Hong Kong are still currently closed. But related to that, on Denver actually just cut the ribbon on the first 4 gates of a project that's going to add 39 new gates to its concourses, and they will all be used by United. So more United flights coming to Denver. Looks like they've also included some new restrooms, a nursing room, and a pet relief area, as well as the first outdoor deck for passengers equipped with fire pits. And that's something you don't normally get in an airport, the ability to go outside and sit on a deck and sit by the fire. So kind of cool.
Yeah, that's Alaska is also launching new flights starting December 17th.
Okay.
They are going to be connecting Los Angeles with a ton of other destinations that were previously either suspended or cut. Salt Lake City, multiple destinations in Hawaii, Cancun, Reno. So all their seasonal services are still planned to be taking off, which is kind of surprising. So when we talk about seasonal services, usually at sometime mid-December, in this case, December 17th through April 21st.
Yeah, a little bit more on Alaska. They are actually about to start flying some new aircrafts in March, and they'll be ones you'll recognize the name of because we talked about them last episode. They will be flying 737 Maxes on most of their new flights. And the reason that they want to do that, and they've actually leased another 13 for delivery starting fourth quarter of next year, and they are getting rid of 10 of their Airbus A320s. Definitely a big win for Boeing to see a company going from Airbus to Boeing because it's been the other way for a while now. But Alaska said the Maxes are actually 24% or 20% more fuel efficient, and they can fly 600 miles further. Which is a big deal for them. That's going to save them quite a bit of money on jet fuel.
I'm wondering if we're going to see companies like this transition into the Maxes again now that they've been or they've been updated with the new safety regulations, at least in the States, just because of the routing. I wonder if we're going to see those on specific routing due to the fuel consumption as well as the extra mileage, or I wonder if they're going to be using them just straight up over other aircrafts just because of the fuel consumption.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see. As far as if I personally would fly in a 737 Max, I don't see why not. To be 100% honest, 2 crashes despite them being at the same time
in roughly the same area
honestly makes me more suspicious of the maintenance programs in the area than it makes me suspicious of the aircraft.
Yeah, exactly. That's on the same note of adding services in. Delta is also adding in not too many seasonal routes, but they're adding, it says, up to 4 times weekly service between Tokyo and Honolulu. So
interesting.
And that's going to be starting in December. Now, this is just speculation, but I am thinking that this is happening because of how different the regulations were in Hawaii, that Japan actually trusts Hawaiian residents to travel during the pandemic than the rest of the U.S., just because of it being an island state, not too far off. But 4 services a week departing now until March 30th of next year. Delta's also launching a 4-time week service between JFK and Nigeria on December 10th. And then also 3 times between Atlanta and Johannesburg, South Africa. So they're adding 2 routes from the States to Africa. It obviously northern and southern, but very strange timing. I would like to dig more into why they've chosen those particular routings to open up.
Yeah, and obviously, we've kind of discussed it in the past. Cargo is a big thing for these commercial airlines right now, especially with vaccine distribution and things like that coming. So you've got to wonder if that plays into some of these decisions, but the airports they're flying out of don't necessarily make sense for that. So
no, not for cargo flights.
We'll see what actually happens. I would not be surprised if we come back in 2 weeks and tell you that a lot of these new routings were canceled.
Yeah, that's it. The only thing I can think of is that they're just trying to maybe expand Delta's presence globally. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes on routings, because international routings are a mess to actually establish, because you think you have to have multiple governments involved. Some, like in the States, we have where there's a law in place where a lot of people probably don't know this. You wouldn't be able to fly from, let's say, JFK to Atlanta on Lufthansa, a foreign carrier. You have to fly on an American carrier. So other countries are the same way, where you can't fly, Delta from Johannesburg, to Lagos. But maybe they're working something out with the government to do that. But yeah, there's definitely something going on.
And just to clarify, that's unless it's a connection. If you are on a connecting flight, then you can do that. But that's kind of, we talked a little bit about an open skies agreement with the EU and stuff last week, and that relates directly to that as far as what carriers can operate, and that just has to do with keeping the revenue from the airlines and the tax revenue within the country. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so a little more airline news from Delta and WestJet. They had actually applied for a transborder joint venture, but they have since said that the deal is off because the DOT attached the things they could attach to the approval were unacceptable. They said that the joint venture would not be allowed to include Swoop, which is the low cost affiliate of WestJet, and that the carriers would have to give up 16 takeoff and landing slots at New York LaGuardia to competitors, which is a no deal for Delta at that point.
Right.
If it had happened, it would have given them a transborder market share of 27%, which is actually pretty substantial for a US Canada market share.
Yeah. Yeah, Canada is very, very WestJet / Air Canada. That is, you're flying on one of those two if you have anything to do with Canada normally.
Yeah, and if you ever want to fly into Toronto, if you fly into WestJet, you actually get to go to the airport that's like right in downtown Toronto, which is business travelers prefer that a lot of the time because it saves them a ton of time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of people don't even know that there are two airports into Toronto. So
That's
I think
all I
that's pretty
have.
much everything that I had as well. I was
Oh,
gonna do a small thing here, but can't bring myself to do it now.
I actually do have one more thing
Okay.
before we end this up, and it is that Thailand has announced a new tourist visa for U.S. travelers. This would be for leisure travelers and would allow you to stay up to 60 days. You do have to apply and receive approval before arriving in the country, and you have to be transported to an alternative state quarantine hotel for 2 weeks. But those hotels have actually launched dedicated quarantine packages, which include your meals, 24-hour nurse services, COVID-19 screenings, and more. There's lists online of the hotels that you're able to get, but Thailand's really just trying to keep their tourism industry alive. So, a new visa that does allow you to travel there if you have the time and the ability to stay for over 2 weeks.
Yeah, Thailand is one of those countries that relies heavily on the American dollars. Honestly, that Thailand is a huge, huge tourism spot. And with sustainable tourism, it being kind of a huge thing in the past decade or so, that a lot of tourism has kind of transitioned to sustainable tourism. And when we say sustainable tourism, it kind of means more low impact. It's going to be a lot
Right.
more hiking. You're going to be one with nature. Um, to kind of try to keep everything how it is kind of the gist of that. So Thailand, a beautiful country, sustainable tourism. I'm I'm glad that they're at least trying to do other things like this. I don't know how effective it's going to be, just because a lot of people, it's still going to be expensive to travel, and with
Yeah.
a lot of people in some tight spots financially, I don't know if they're going to be able to hit their target that they're trying for here. But obviously they have to try something.
Yeah, I mean, props to them for trying to get it done, but I felt that it was important to put that out there because if you want to travel, it's an alternative. Again, don't recommend traveling. I think that's something that I feel like we have to say every time we talk about a destination now. But it this one does include you quarantining for 14 days, and it does include all those extra services. So that's something that's great. uh but not many people are going to have an extra 2 week, that's 2 weeks in a hotel, and then you can go explore the country, which is probably another week. Not that many people have 3 weeks, I guess. If you're laid off, maybe, but then you don't have the money to go travel, so we'll see what actually happens from that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, yeah, we'll have to see if it actually helps them out at all. I'm not convinced, just because of the state of the U.S. travel system right now.
Yeah.
But no, unfortunately, we don't have a an unknown destination this week. Just because I had one, but maybe next week I'll be able to, uh, in good conscience, maybe throw together like a little road trip idea, just
Yeah.
for, even if you're not from the area of where I am going to be putting it together. It might give you some ideas on how you could do it yourself. Just I can go through the resources that I use to kind of put it together, as well as um, maybe even throw together like a cost summary or things you might need to know beforehand.
Yeah, I think that kind of does lead us to an unknown destination, because if you thought we were going to tell you where to travel, what you didn't expect us is we're going to tell you to travel to your own home. Uh,
Yeah, stay safe during the holidays, and I guess that's gonna wrap it up for this week's episode. So,
yeah.
thank.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, that's right. I was just gonna
Yeah.
say thanks everybody for listening. Make sure you check out the links in the description. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to us if you're interested in more travel related content. We're really dedicating this particular podcast to the travel world. Trying not to do anything pretty off the topic of that. So if you like us, give us that subscribe, follow button, whatever platform you're using. And until next time, from Justin and myself, we will see you next time.
See you later, everybody.